After tonight's story, you won't look at your Christmas tree the same again. Have you ever wondered the history of the Christmas tree? I have, so I thought that it would be fun to create a story that goes through the reasons why we bring this tree into our homes, why we fill it with lights and ornaments. How did it all begin? Well, you'll learn tonight. I hope you enjoy the story. Be sure to find a cozy, safe spot that you can just sit and enjoy and maybe learn something new. All right, my friends, thank you for being here, and don't forget to subscribe. Please like this video and comment. Let me know your thoughts. Okay, let's get started. Enjoy. The world outside was quiet and cloaked in a thick blanket of snow that glistened under the light of the full moon. Inside a cozy cottage, nestled in the woods, a fire crackled warmly in the stone hearth, filling the room with the scent of pine and cedar. A soft patchwork quilt was draped across a weathered armchair, where Ella, a historian with a love for winter traditions, settled with her cup of spiced tea. The windows frosted over as the chill deepened, and she smiled at the timeless magic of winter. Ella's home was a haven, decorated with evergreen boughs strung across the mantel and candles glowing in the window. But the centerpiece of her living room was a tall, fragrant pine tree, adorned with handmade ornaments, twinkling lights, and strings of dried orange slices. Its star topper, a family heirloom, shimmered faintly. This tree wasn't just decoration. It was a tradition steeped in layers of history, a symbol of resilience through the cold. Ella heard a faint knock at her door. Her niece Clara lived next door and had stopped by for their annual holiday tradition that spanned 3 days. Each year, Ella shared a tale from history with Clara, weaving together myth, culture, and fact. And this year, she had chosen the story of the Christmas tree. Clara made herself at home, grabbing a steaming cup of hot apple cider and cozying up next to the fire in her favorite chair. "Ready?" Ella asked, her voice warm and inviting. Clara nodded eagerly. "I've been looking forward to this all week. You always tell stories like they're alive." Ella smiled, flipping open the book to the first chapter. "Well, this one has been alive for centuries, longer even. Tonight, we're starting with the very beginning, with the ancient people who first revered the evergreen tree. It's a story of survival, hope, and the magic of enduring through the harshest winters." Clara leaned forward, her interest piqued. "Why evergreens, though? What made them so special?" "Ah, an excellent question," Ella said, her eyes twinkling. She turned the book toward Clara, revealing an illustration of a snow-covered forest, evergreen trees standing tall among their bare-branched neighbors. Imagine this. It's the dead of winter, thousands of years ago. The days are short, the nights are long, and the cold is unrelenting. Most trees have shed their leaves, retreating into dormancy to survive. But not the evergreens. They remain vibrant, their needles a deep green, standing strong against the snow and ice. Clara nodded slowly. So they were a symbol of resilience? Exactly, Ella said, tapping the illustration. For ancient people, especially in places like Northern Europe, evergreens represented life when everything else seemed to sleep or fade. They saw these trees as magical, proof that nature had the strength to endure even the harshest conditions. They became a beacon of hope, a reminder that spring would come again. Clara tilted her head thoughtfully. Did they use the trees in rituals? Oh, yes, Ella said, her voice dropping to a softer, more melodic tone, as if sharing a secret. In Norse mythology, evergreens were associated with the Yule celebration. The Norse believed that the sun was a wheel that turned the seasons, and Yule marked the turning point, when the days would slowly begin to grow longer. To honor this, they brought boughs of evergreen into their homes as a symbol of renewal. Ella flipped to another page, revealing an image of a Roman feast. And it wasn't just the Norse. The ancient Romans, too, used evergreen branches during their festival of Saturnalia, a week-long celebration of the winter solstice. They decorated their homes with greenery, exchanging gifts and feasting in honor of Saturn, the god of agriculture. Clara's eyes lit up. I've heard of Saturnalia before. It was the start to a lot of modern holiday traditions, right? Exactly, Ella said, impressed. Saturnalia was all about joy, generosity, and light in the darkest part of the year. And the evergreen, it was the perfect symbol for that. A reminder that life endures, even in the coldest times. Clara smiled, her gaze drifting to the Christmas tree standing in the corner of Ella's cozy living room. Its branches adorned with delicate ornaments and twinkling lights. It's amazing to think that something as simple as a tree could mean so much to so many people for so long. Ella nodded, her voice quiet and thoughtful. That's the beauty, isn't it? The evergreen was a source of hope long before it became a Christmas tree. It stood for something universal, something timeless. Clara leaned back in her chair, the warmth of the fire and the rhythm of Ella's voice wrapping around her like a soft blanket. What happened next? How did the evergreen become part of Christmas? Ella closed the book gently, letting the question hang in the air. That, she said, with a teasing smile, is a story for tomorrow night. Clara groaned playfully, though her smile betrayed her anticipation. Fine, but I'm holding you to it. Ella chuckled, reaching for her own cup of hot spiced tea. I wouldn't have it any other way. The fire crackled again, filling the room with a soothing warmth as the snow continued to fall outside. Each flake a quiet promise of more stories to come. The next evening, Clara arrived at Ella's cottage just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the snow-covered landscape in hues of lavender and gold. She stomped the snow from her boots on the porch before stepping inside, where the warmth of the fire greeted her like a hug. "I'm ready," Clara announced, shrugging off her coat and settling into her chair by the fire. The Christmas tree glowed softly in the corner, its ornaments catching the firelight. Ella smiled from her place on the couch, the leather-bound book resting in her lap. "I had a feeling you'd be eager to continue." "Of course," Ella said, pulling the blanket over her legs. "Last night you left me hanging. You said the evergreen eventually became a Christmas tree, but you didn't explain how." Ella chuckled, opening the book to the next chapter. "Patience, my dear. It's a good story, and good stories take time to tell." She ran her fingers over the page, revealing an illustration of a medieval town square, where villagers were gathered around a large evergreen adorned with apples and ribbons. After the ancient people's reverence for evergreens, the tradition began to evolve, Ella began. By the Middle Ages, evergreen trees started appearing in Europe's winter celebrations. One of the most fascinating origins is tied to something called the paradise tree. Clara leaned forward. "Paradise tree? That sounds mysterious." "It does, doesn't it?" Ella said with a grin. The paradise tree was part of medieval plays that told the story of Adam and Eve. These plays were performed on December 24th, the feast of Adam and Eve. And the tree represented the Garden of Eden. They would decorate it with red apples to symbolize the forbidden fruit, and sometimes hang wafers on the branches to represent the Eucharist. Clara's brow furrowed. "That's so interesting. So the Christmas tree at that time was tied to religious stories." "Exactly," Ella said, turning the book to show Clara another image. This one of a family decorating a small evergreen in their home. But as time passed, people began bringing these trees into their homes for the feast day, and the decorations became more elaborate. They added candles for light, ribbons for beauty, and even small, sweet treats for the children to enjoy. Clara tilted her head. "Candles? Weren't they afraid of the trees catching fire?" Ella smiled knowingly. "They were very careful, of course. Candles were placed in little metal holders, and families only lit them briefly, often while they sang carols or said prayers. It was a way to bring light and warmth into their homes during the darkest nights of the year. And the sight of the flickering candles against the green branches must have felt like something truly magical. Clara gazed at the tree in Ella's living room, imagining it illuminated by tiny, delicate flames instead of electric lights. "I can see how that would feel special, like you were lighting up the night with hope." "Exactly," Ella said, her tone softening. That's what the tree was becoming, a symbol of hope, joy, and light in the darkness. By the 16th century, The tradition had spread across parts of Europe, and it was Germany that the Christmas tree as we know it truly began to take shape. Ella turned to another page, showing an image of Martin Luther walking through a snowy forest, gazing up at the stars. One story credits Martin Luther, the Protestant reformer, for being the first to add candles to a Christmas tree. Legend has it that he was walking home one winter evening when he saw the stars shining through the branches of the evergreens. Inspired by the beauty of the scene, he recreated it for his family by decorating a tree with candles. Clara's eyes lit up. That's beautiful. It's like he wanted to bring the starlight indoors. Exactly, Ella said with a smile. The tradition grew from there, and by the 18th century, decorated Christmas trees were a beloved part of German celebrations. Each family's tree was unique, adorned with whatever they could afford: fruit, nuts, ribbons, even hand-carved ornaments. It became a tradition not just for the wealthy, but for everyone. A tree could be as simple or as elaborate as a family wanted, and it always carried the same message: light and life in the heart of winter. Clara leaned forward again. But how did the tradition spread beyond Germany? Ella turned another page in the book, revealing an elegant illustration of a Victorian parlor. That, my dear, brings us to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. In the mid-19th century, Prince Albert, who was German, brought the Christmas tree tradition to England when he married Queen Victoria. The royal family embraced the custom wholeheartedly. Ella gestured to the illustration which showed Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, and their children gathered around a grand Christmas tree adorned with candles, ornaments, and gifts beneath its branches. In 1848, an image of their family celebrating Christmas around their tree was published in a popular magazine. It caused quite a sensation. Suddenly, everyone in Britain, and even America, wanted a tree just like theirs. The Christmas tree became not just a tradition, but a fashion statement. Clara's mouth fell open slightly. So one picture from the royal family made it a global tradition? Ella nodded. It's amazing, isn't it? The image captured the magic and intimacy of the tree, and people couldn't resist wanting to create that feeling in their own homes. From there, the Christmas tree became a central part of holiday celebrations across the Western world. Clara leaned back, her mug of cocoa resting on her knee. It's incredible to think about how far the tradition has come, from ancient rituals to royal trendsetters. And yet, the meaning stayed the same: light in the darkness, life in the cold. Ella smiled warmly, her gaze lingering on the glowing tree in the corner of the room. That's the beauty of it. The Christmas tree has changed and evolved, but it remains a symbol of hope, joy, and togetherness. And tomorrow, we'll explore how the modern tree, with its twinkling lights and sparkling ornaments, came to be. Clara grinned, pulling her blanket tighter around her shoulders. I can't wait. The fire crackled softly as the two sat together, the story lingering in the air like a promise of another magical evening. The following evening, Clara arrived earlier, bundled tightly against the biting cold. Snowflakes swirled around her as she climbed Ella's porch steps, her cheeks rosy from the crisp air. Inside, the cottage was warm and inviting, the fire crackling in the hearth and the Christmas tree glowing softly in the corner. Clara hung up her coat and practically bounced into her chair by the fire. I've been thinking about last night's story all day, she said, her excitement palpable. How one royal family inspired millions. It's amazing how traditions spread. But you still haven't told me, when did Christmas trees come to America? Ella smiled, closing the book she had been thumbing through and settling it on the side table. I knew you'd ask that. It's a fascinating chapter in the tree's history. She leaned back, her eyes sparkling in the firelight. Christmas trees first arrived in America in the early 19th century, brought by German immigrants. At first, it was a tradition mostly celebrated within those communities. But as more people witnessed the beauty of the trees and the joy they brought, the custom began to spread. Clara leaned forward, resting her chin on her hands. Were they as elaborate as the ones we have now? Not at all, Ella replied, shaking her head. In those days, the trees were quite simple. Families would decorate them with homemade ornaments, strings of popcorn, dried fruit, nuts, and paper garlands. If they could afford it, they might add a few candles, carefully placed and only lit for brief moments of celebration. The beauty of the tree came from its simplicity and the love that went into each decoration. Clara's brow furrowed thoughtfully. It sounds lovely, but I imagine there weren't many trees at first. Weren't some people hesitant about the tradition? Oh, very hesitant, Ella said with a chuckle. In fact, some Puritan communities disapproved of Christmas trees, seeing them as frivolous or even unchristian. It wasn't until the mid-19th century, when the trees became more widely accepted, that they truly took root in American culture. And do you know what helped change people's minds? Clara tilted her head. Another royal family? Ella laughed. Not quite this time. It was literature. In 1850, a story called The Christmas Tree by Harriet Beecher Stowe described the tradition, and that helped to popularize it. But what really cemented the Christmas tree in the hearts of Americans was the image of families gathered around them, sharing joy and love. By the late 1800s, Christmas trees were becoming a staple in homes across the country. And then something extraordinary happened. Clara sat up straighter, her curiosity piqued. What happened? Ella's expression softened, her voice tinged with awe. The invention of electric lights. In 1882, Edward Johnson, a colleague of Thomas Edison, created the first string of electric Christmas tree lights. He hand-wired 80 small red, white, and blue bulbs and placed them on his tree. It was a spectacle unlike anything people had ever seen. Imagine a tree glowing with steady, vibrant light. No flames, no risk of fire. It must have felt like pure magic. Clara's eyes widened. That sounds incredible, but it must have been expensive. Oh, very expensive, Ella said, nodding. At first, only the wealthiest families could afford electric lights. But as time went on and technology advanced, the lights became more accessible. By the early 20th century, they were a common sight on trees in both homes and public spaces. And the tradition of lighting up trees spread even further, turning them into symbols of warmth and community during the holiday season. Clara gazed at the tree in Ella's living room, its twinkling lights casting gentle shadows on the wall. It's amazing how the tree has evolved from something sacred to ancient people to a centerpiece of medieval plays to royal fashion, and now this. And yet, it's still about bringing light into the darkness. Ella nodded, her smile warm. Exactly. The tree has changed over time, but its meaning has stayed the same. A reminder of resilience and hope. A celebration of life, even in the coldest and darkest months. And no matter how much the world changes, that light, both literal and metaphorical, will always shine. Clara's voice softened as she asked, "Do you think that's why people love it so much? Because no matter where we are or what's happening in our lives, the tree reminds us that there's always light to be found." Ella's eyes glistened as she looked at Clara. "I think you're exactly right. The tree isn't just a decoration, it's a story. Each light, each ornament, each branch tells a tale of the people who came before us and the love they carried forward. And when we light our trees each year, we become a part of that story, adding our own chapter to a tradition that's older than we can imagine." Ella closed the book, her hands resting on its worn leather cover. Today, the Christmas tree is a tradition shared all over the world, adapted in countless ways. In Japan, trees are decorated with origami cranes. In Mexico, they're adorned with vibrant paper ornaments. And in Finland, people might even decorate an outdoor tree as a gift to the birds. Clara smiled. "I love that everyone makes it their own." Ella glanced at her own tree, the twinkling lights reflected in her eyes. That's what makes it so special. Each tree tells a story of the people who decorate it, the memories they share, and the traditions they carry forward. And at its heart, the Christmas tree is still what it's always been, a symbol of life, light, and hope in the darkest time of the year. The fire crackled softly, filling the room with its warm glow. Clara leaned back, her eyes heavy with contentment. "Thanks for sharing this with me, Aunt Ella." I'll never look at a Christmas tree the same way again. Ella reached over and gently took Clara's hand. And that, my dear, is the magic of stories. They don't just teach us, they change how we see the world. So when you decorate your tree this year, remember, every light you hang is a spark of hope, every ornament a piece of history, and every branch a reminder that even in the darkest times, there is beauty, life, and love. As the evening faded into night, Ella's Christmas tree stood as a beacon of quiet wonder, its lights twinkling like a constellation brought to earth. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in a pristine hush, as if nature herself paused to listen to the whispers of the season. Ella gazed at the tree, her heart full, and thought of all the hands through history that had decorated such trees. Hands that longed for light, for warmth, and connection. Every tree, she murmured, her voice as soft as the snow beyond the window, is a promise. A promise that even in the darkest winter we carry the power to create beauty, to share joy, and to hold hope like a lantern in our hearts.